Hello! For this episode, I'm trying something new for the first time. I've been submitted a question, in this case by a friend, and I'm going to do my best to provide an unscripted, more or less off the cuff, but still hopefully accurate answer to it. If it works, I'd like to do a bunch more episodes like this, so if you happen to have a question that pertains to music, put it in the comment section. If I feel qualified to address it, I will. This is also the first episode where I'm trying out a new name. Not for myself, but for the show. There are still a bunch of episodes that haven't been released yet that use the old name, so don't be surprised when you see it floating around again. But I think I like this new one better, so I'll probably be using it for new videos that I make from here on out. I'm Peter Lawson, and for the first time, this is Something About Music. Today's question, which was submitted by Jake, is just what is it that a conductor does exactly? At first glance, that might seem a bit on the obvious side. After all, anyone who's been to an orchestra, band, or choral concert, or for that matter a football game or parade, has seen what conductors do firsthand. When you really think about it, though, there's definitely an air of mystery surrounding this particular role. Conductors are the only musicians who typically face away from the audience when they perform. Other than Miles Davis or Yo La Tengo once when I saw them in Knoxville and they were really angry at the audience. They're also the only musicians who aren't performing a certain piece by John Cage who typically don't produce any sound when they perform, at least not any sound that directly contributes to the performance. I know that I, for one, had a lot of strange ideas about what conductors do when I was growing up because of cartoons, specifically the cartoons of Bugs Bunny. We see Bugs perform as a conductor in two cartoons that I'm aware of, 1949's Long-Haired Hare and 1959's Baton Bunny, both directed by Chuck Jones. In the first of these, Bugs infiltrates a concert at the Hollywood Bowl in the guise of famous conductor Leopold Stokowski. He then uses his conducting to essentially torture an opera singer, who does kind of have it coming to him in Bugs' defense. He forces him to sing a very high note for an incredibly, inhumanly long period of time, until the roof of the venue just collapses on his head. Even after the collapse, Bugs makes him sing the note more, and it's clear that he has absolutely no choice but to follow along. In the second cartoon, Bugs is conducting an orchestra when he starts to swat at an annoying fly. Again, the orchestra is simply compelled to follow along with his every movement. From these cartoons, you get an impression that conductors wield an awesome, almost supernatural level of power over the musicians they conduct. Every movement they make is read as a very clear signal of what to play or sing, and the performers have absolutely no choice but to obey that signal, even if it means completely rewriting a piece of music at a moment's notice. Now, of course, this is an exaggeration. Conductors don't really communicate what note to play at any given moment. But there is some truth to it. Personally, I've had the experience of singing the same piece of music under several different conductors of various levels of skill, and that's been enough to convince me that a really good conductor actually does have the power to reinvent a piece of music. Exactly how that can happen is what I'd like to get at here. Okay, so at the most basic level, we could say that a conductor's job has two aspects, the musical and the administrative. As far as the administrative side goes, there can be a lot of variation. The head conductor of a major civic orchestra or opera company is basically an executive in a huge organization. As such, administrative tasks might very well make up the majority of their job. In other cases, it might be limited to scheduling rehearsals, making sure that everyone has a copy of the music to be performed, making sure that you have a space to perform and rehearse in. Sometimes there might be little to no administrative side at all. I'm pretty sure, though, that it's the musical side that you're more interested in hearing about. As I see it, there are basically three overlapping ways in which a conductor can influence the music: by making interpretive decisions, by communicating those decisions to the ensemble, and by giving cues. The idea of a conductor making decisions is an oddly controversial one. This controversy is basically rooted in a trend that's existed among composers for at least the past 400 years or so, of providing more and more information about how a piece of music should be performed in the score. If you look at a piece of choral music from the 16th century, basically what you see is the words and the notes. Any information about how those notes should actually be performed is simply not present. Not so long after that, it started to be typical for composers to include some indication of how quickly a piece of music should be performed and whether notes should be loud or soft. Over time, these indications got to be much more specific, and new symbols were created to show how phrases should be shaped and when the music should get gradually louder or softer or quicker or slower. By the early 20th century, it had reached the point where, in an extreme case, you might have indications of how each and every note should be inflected. Each new level of specificity brought with it new potential for something to be missed in the realization, and among some people, this gradually led to an air of suspicion against performers in general, and conductors in particular. The music critic Theodor Adorno once famously said that he would prefer to sit at home and read the score of Mozart's opera The Marriage of Figaro rather than go see it, because only the performance that he would hear in his head would live up to his standard of perfection. By the 1950s and 60s, some composers, like the American Milton Babbitt, had started writing music for early electronic synthesizers, not because they had any particular interest in electronic sounds, but simply because they didn't believe that any human performer could meet their expectation of accuracy. This situation gradually led to the development of an ethos that would have been pretty alien to any musician living before the 20th century. This held that a musical performance shouldn't include anything other than what's already on the page. If you'd like to hear what the result of this ethos can be in an extreme case, check out pretty much any recording of a Vivaldi concerto from the 50s or 60s. These incredibly bland performances of what's actually some of the most exciting music ever written have often been derisively referred to as sewing machine music. Although, to be honest, I really don't feel like that's quite fair to sewing machines. The fact is that regardless of how much or how little information is included in the score, any worthwhile performance of a piece of music, at least a piece of music designed to be performed by humans, has to include decisions, beginning with the initial decision of just who is going to be doing the performing. Every decision doesn't need to spring directly from the mind of the conductor, though. That piece of 16th century choral music I mentioned before might not have very much information on the page, but there are sources available to help give you an idea of what choices would have been typical at the time when it was written. Doing research in order to ensure that every choice they make is as informed as it possibly can be is an important part of a conductor's job, particularly one who specializes in conducting earlier music. Research can get you pretty far, but at a certain point, it has to become personal. A good conductor has to have a real vision of what they want a piece of music to be. And because a conductor by definition can't perform a piece of music on their own, in order to realize that vision, they also have to be skilled at communicating their choices to the other performers they're working with. This communication is the bulk of what happens in the rehearsal process. The ways in which decisions are made and communicated are probably among the things that vary the most between different conductors. The process might be collaborative or dictatorial. A conductor might show up on the first day of rehearsal with a clear vision of what the piece should be already in place, or it might emerge gradually through a process of trial and error. To get what they want out of their performers, a conductor might choose to engage them in conversation, or, all too often, to berate them with verbal abuse. Really, the one aspect of communication that is most essential, and I think it's fair to say universal among conductors, is cues. When I say cues, I don't just mean signaling someone when to come in, although that is a part of it, but all the things that you see a conductor do during a performance, as well as quite a bit that the performers see but you don't. A cue is anything that a conductor can do to communicate information to an ensemble while they're in the midst of performing. Cues are most strongly associated with the hands, maybe or maybe not augmented with a conducting baton, but good conductors give cues with virtually all parts of the body, most especially the face. The most basic and essential cue, which most conductors give continuously with their strong hand, is simply to indicate the tempo and what beat of a measure you're on at any given moment. Conductors do this by using particular shapes associated with different time signatures. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. These can vary somewhat, but it's typical to bring the stick down on the 1, which is the origin of the term downbeat. These shapes can then be modified in all kinds of ways to indicate other information. For example, keeping the shape small when things are quiet, or big for loud moments. Moving in a very crisp way for staccato rhythm, or very smoothly for legato. Good conductors also tend to incorporate other movements into these shapes to reflect characteristic rhythms and syncopations that emerge within a piece, meaning that the stick work of a conductor working on a complex piece of music from the 19th or 20th century can often be incredibly complex and mystifying to watch. The weaker hand, meanwhile, can also be used for all kinds of auxiliary functions, such as giving entrance cues, regulating the shape of phrasing, or making little adjustments here and there. Of course, the weak hand is also often brought in to join the right for key moments, something that I've sometimes heard it said you're not supposed to do, but it seems that every conductor does at least occasionally. This technical side of cueing is what's most emphasized and most apparent, but there's also a more holistic side to things. Something that I sometimes miss when I see performances by unconducted groups like string quartets. Something that's not spoken about all that much, but what's very apparent when you see a really great conductor in performance, is the degree to which they're responsible for sculpting the emotional content of a piece of music, what's often referred to as the affect. When the chemistry between a conductor and an ensemble is really clicking the way that it should, the ensemble can become like the mirror on a telescope to reflect and magnify whatever energy is coming off of the conductor. This means that the conductor's body language and facial expressions can ultimately have as much impact on the resulting performance as their technical movements can. I've seen and been involved in plenty of performances where this alchemy didn't really take place, but when it does, it can generate a feeling of emotional unity between the ensemble, the conductor, and the audience that can be a profoundly moving experience. To me, it's probably this more than anything else that really justifies the existence of conductors in the first place. Alright, that's about it, but before I close, let me just say a little tiny bit about history. This energetic, charismatic, and expressive role of conductors is something that I personally feel is really important and adds a whole lot to our musical world, but it's not historically universal. It's something that was developed gradually from the late 18th to the late 19th centuries, a time when a lot of famous composers, including Mozart, Beethoven, Mendelssohn, Liszt, and Mahler, all worked extensively as conductors, each bringing something of their own personal flair to the job. Before that, there were conductors, but they tended to be regarded more as timekeepers, and they almost always played an instrument on top of their conducting, usually harpsichord. It would be interesting to go back in time and see what kind of an impact that had on the quality of musical performances. I guess we can add that to the list of reasons to go back in time. Alright, that'll do it. Thank you so much for watching, and I wish you a wonderful day. Until next time, so long.